My name is Kurt Cotanch from Jasper Hill. I'm the new guy there, and Matteo nearly pushed me out the door to give a Listeria talk today. And if a show of hands for anybody that knows Matteo Keeler and how visionary and motivational, inspirational he can be, I'm the dead weight on him to calm down his visions. My last 15 years, my training is, you've got a double header here of ruminant nutritionists. My training is in ruminant nutrition, and I studied at UVM and recently spent 15 years at Minor Institute in Shazy, New York. Anybody know Minor Institute? Cool. One in the back, Dave. Two, yes, previous speaker. All I could think about this morning's talks and this afternoon, the visit, and your talk right there is like, oh my gosh, my brain is spinning with so many ideas. We need some fistulated cows. I'm sorry, UK. That's what I've been doing. I've been dipping my arm into rumens for the last 15 years, looking at fiber digestion and working with the Cornell group and the University of Bologna group on generating the CNCPS ration balancing program for dairy cows. Which brings me to one slight offshoot here. A friend of mine, Alberto, at the University of Bologna, in Formagoni's lab, he did his PhD research at the University of Wisconsin under Paul Weimer, and they were looking at the symbiotic relationship between rumen microbes and the host, the cow. Thinking, what's going on there between cow and rumen microbiomes? And they simply took the rumen contents of two cows and switched them and monitored the microbiome for a couple of weeks, and what do you think happened to the microbiomes of those rumens? Took cow A, gave it to cow B, B to A. It reverted to the cow's original microbiome. Wow, that tells me that I don't know much about the rumen right now. So anyway, I'm here to talk to you about how we control Listeria at Jasper Hill. I'm kind of the director of farm operations there. I shouldn't say kind of. I am the director of farm operations. How many of you have been to Jasper Hill and seen that previous nice picture of the barn? How many of you have been there in January? Ooh, so you recognize this photo of a snow-covered barn about 20 below. And that's the Jasper Hill where the air shears are and the pretty place. I spend most of my time, well, they're geographically, everybody knows where Vermont is, New England, hopefully. We're like an hour and a half below Montreal, so we're way up there. That's where I work. Talk about bleak midwinter. It gets cold up there at Andersonville. We have 200 Holstein cows. Here's the description. The Jasper Hill farm has about 45 air shears. They graze, feed dry hay, some supplemental fat, and grains in the barn. Andersonville is a totally confined barn, 180 Holsteins in a freestall barn, mattresses with sawdust, and we make raw milk. Both farms are the primary source of raw milk for the cheeses at Jasper Hill. All right, this simple slide, but it focuses me a little bit. The practices where we minimize the risk of Listeria. 1, look at the sources. 2, consider the vectors. And 3, monitor. It really is a simple approach, but in the end, it comes down to people. The people on the farm. If they don't understand that, then your links are broken in the chain. So we all recognize that common sources of Listeria, silage, mud, water, manure, milking equipment, right? It's all right there. We don't have to be taught that. One of the things to convey to farm workers is anything that splatters is a vector. And then including you, the people, are a vector. And not to forget that we can be part of the problem. All right, so in Matteo's coercing of me to come and give a microbiology talk when I'm a rumen guy, He said, just give them the testimonial. All they need to do is feed dry hay, and they can deal with their listeria risk. I was like, Matteo, you can't just walk onto a farm and say, switch your whole farming operation and feed dry hay. But the point he wanted me to make is that it is possible to make dry hay on days like today if you've got a dryer. All right. It's like, okay, Matteo, I'll try to convey that, but I want you to, Matteo, understand that this dryer is not a cure-all. It's a huge asset, but I cannot take 30 to 40% moisture grass and make perfectly good hay. Because what happens when you heat moisture? That's how we cook our food, right? So what's happening to those hay bales? And I'll challenge you, anybody that comes to visit for Jasper, come visit with me. Matteo can join us. But I'll show you the brittleness, the crunchy cracker-type hay that we can produce with that dryer. We can make perfectly good hay with the dryer, but if we're drying down wet stuff, it's like, oh, what is going on with the microbiome of the epiphytic bacteria on hay? Because whenever we feed sun-cured hay versus hay dryer hay, something changes. Cows eat it better. They eat it quicker. They seem to get more milk out of it. Testimonial. I need somebody to help me do the research. All right. So that's why up here I say, I call it the hay finisher. You still need a lot of sunshine. You get it as close to you can to being barn-dried hay, and big round bales, you can finish them off, and as an insurance policy, stick them in your barn without worrying about mold or possible fire. I'm not going to mention the expense. That's okay. Panos shared these. He's our microbiologist. The other thing you need on your farms is an in-house microbiologist to make all this happen effectively. We're talking about time lag and getting forage analyses and milk analyses back, and having the microbiologist right there on site helps. They conducted a study of which Andersonville was one of the farms when they were feeding silage as opposed to dry hay, and we had problems with Listeria. So I was like, what did they decide to do? They decided to conduct a study and say, where's this coming from? And you can see across the board the types of Listeria, the subspecies there by farm. Farms B, C, and D were feeding silage. Farm A and E were feeding dry hay. I was like, well, how did you guys conclude that dry hay was the cure-all? Look at Farm A. They're feeding all dry hay and grain. They still got Listeria. So 2 out of the 3 silage farms have Listeria, MONOCYTOGENES, and 1 out of the 2 dry hay farms has Listeria, MONOCYTOGENES. So I was like, okay, I'm a little suspicious that dry hay is the cure-all. Getting a little further down into the nitty-gritty of where they found the species of Listeria, the common denominator to me is silage is one possibly, but it's water. Water is the vector. So if you can convince all of your employees that wherever you see water, be leery. Be very, very careful. Whether it's a foot bath, whether it's a hose, whether it's washing your farm equipment in the milking parlor. Obviously, these are pictures of photos of where you might find Listeria. In the foot bath, for the human boot bath, the water troughs, this biofilm conversation has got me all stirred up. I'm wondering if we've simply been fortunate in our lack of Listeria hits. But one of the things we focus on, these are the conclusions that they came from that study. Silage, water, and monitoring are critical, but I'm going to come to that. One of the things that we, on Andersonville especially, is that, I'll back up. We dry wipe everything. You know, how do you wash your unit? Inevitably it gets kicked off, right? And they've pooped on the floor, and if it didn't suck up manure, you're thankful. But what happens in those situations? Do you hose it off? Do you wipe it off? Do you dunk it in a bucket of water? Anybody? Yeah, we do not. We wipe dry unless the inside of that liner got messed. We do not touch it. And we are constantly washing our own gloved hands so that we're not conveying, so that we do not become the vector of manure or any bodily tissues, fluids, dust, anything from that farm. Okay, so I'm going to go back to trying to sell you a hay dryer. You can look out the window or look at the slide. These are days that we commonly see. There's a storm front rolling in, and we've got to roll, and the mantra is, we have a dryer. Just keep driving. We have a dryer. Get those bales to the barn, and we make large rounds, 5-foot bales, and they go over the holes, and there's a huge propane burner that blows hot air in a sub-basement that comes up through the bale and supposedly dries the bale. Supposedly. Oh, Sherry. My wife is in the back. She's grinning at me. And it's like, don't go too far, Kurt. Don't go too far. It's like, okay, so when my guys at 5 in the morning cut some of these bales open and a big plume of white powder comes out, it's like, well, what the heck was that? These are supposed to be dry bales. That's rare. I'm giving you the extreme example, but most of the time there's not much mold, though we have found mycotoxins in our dry hay. I wish our hay barn looked like that right now. It is severe drought in the northern U.S., especially Vermont. Even the Canadians, they got done second cut in about 2 weeks, and it was 1/3 their typical crop. And right now, we're in the middle of August. Summer's going to run out on us at Jasper Hill, and we've got about 1/3 of our crop in. So I wish I had a bunk of corn silage. That's what our barn typically looks like. This year, something we've learned with the long hay is that you've got to process it, make it 8 inches or shorter. If you wrap up long hay, it just gets tied up in knots, and cows have to spend way too much time fighting the hay to eat it. About 10 hours. If you calculate that a mouthful is 30 grams, and I watched cows eat it, and I said, okay, 30 grams, I know she's eating 30 pounds of dry matter. What's that? 30 grams in 30 seconds, 60 grams a minute. Oh my gosh, she's got to stand there for 10 hours. What's cattle behavior say? Sore feet, I want to lay down, I'm hurting. But you know, these cows, they don't give up. They will stand there for 10 hours. I stayed up all night to watch them do it. This is an interesting slide. Cows are fussy, just like kids, right? Don't give them choices. This is one pen of cows. There are no gates in that pen. And you see all the cows are down here. And if you can see slightly, a little greener, a little browner, this is the entire pen. They're still coming out of the parlor. Nobody's locked up. They have all chosen, without even trying this, they all knew to walk down to this green bale. So their sense of olfactory is quite intense. I'm a silage guy. I come from silage upbringing. And I know you know this stuff, but I have to reiterate it. You know, to minimize your risk of any bacterial contamination, bad bugs, whether it's Listeria, Clostridia, or anything, you want to get your pH down. Chop at the right moisture. Get the pH down. If your pH is below 4, you're pretty safe. 4.5, typical grass silage. It's risky ground and pH-wise. If you're in the 5 range, all bets are off. Initial dry matter, your initial sugar content, protein, compaction of your silage all come into play. We can talk more in detail later. If you're using an inoculant, they do tend to work. If you use properly, microbial and or preservative. I got my wrist slapped very forcefully by Mr. Mateo. I mentioned, why don't we try potassium sorbate, Mateo? This stuff works. To skip the dryer, right? We could make that much more hay in that much more short a window if we could use some sort of preservative on our dry hay. As nope, we will stick with the biome philosophy and use microbial, and that's why I want to kind of pick people's ears on that. Avoid the mud, avoid the puddles. We do. If it's muddy out, we do not graze our animals. They will stay inside, so we commit to that. Alley scrapers, the management, all the little things that are in the barn that we all know, keep things clean, keep them operational. And the thing is, if you go to our people on the farm, they understand that. They understand that they are a link, and that people, managing a dairy farm is really managing people. Make sure all those people links are aligned and strong and understand the why of what they do. This is something we have to fix. This is outside Andersonville, right? Everybody, if you came to the farm and saw that, you'd say, but you're tracking in all this wet muck with the bales as you're feeding them. And I say, yep, we got to fix that. And there is a plan to improve the drainage and actually build a structure out here to shed the water and maybe even asphalt it to keep it clean. Water bowls, we clean them every other day, if not daily. I know there's slime in there. When we first start up the fans, inevitably birds are in the barn, and birds like to nest in fans. And I say, guys, if we start the fans, check the water troughs, because birds get knocked down by the fans. Yeah, we do test water on a fairly regular basis for bacteria as well as mineral. Okay, here's the nitty-gritty. Besides eliminating the source through dry hay or minimizing the source of MONOCYTOGENES, we constantly monitor. We check milk filters on every milking. We collect every milking's milk filter, freeze it for analysis, and then so we have an identification of, we can't isolate that milk, it's too late, right? That's already gone through the cheese making. But we can label that milk and say, hey, this was a high risk, it had a hit for Listeria MONOCYTOGENES. We then don't necessarily discard that lot, that make, but we watch it very intensively and test it that much more vigorously along the way. So if we have a positive, we end up sampling that cheese, 5 samples per make, and until we make sure that it's either there or not there, and then make a decision, destroy the batch or not. Like I said earlier, we track everything, a lot of acid washes on our bulk tank, along with the standard washing procedures. We watch our chart recorders every day, make sure temperatures on the bulk tank and the wash cycles hit the temperatures required every single day. Gloves, we not only wear gloves, but we throw away gloves. If it's torn, tear it off, throw it away. The gloves are cheap. We got boxes and boxes of them. Wash your gloves during milking. Minimize the spraying. We talked about minimizing use of water to hose off units, but also minimize water on the hosing of the floor. Never when the cows are on the platform in the parlor. Never. We dry wipe. Our milking protocol includes dry wipe first, a dip, and then strip, and units are on. I don't know, how do your milkers milk? I was an old-fashioned, you hold the bottom of the teat cup in these 2 fingers and then kind of guide the teat in. I was like, okay, all of a sudden I become a vector, rather than trying to hold the bottom of the teat cup and let it suck itself onto the teat. That's the little stuff that we try to make sure of. In the post-dip is the 4XLA, nothing fancy. I talked about testing the milk filters. On the creamery side, they're constantly taking swabs and submitting them, so it's just constantly monitoring, constant. And for risk safety assessment, I said we test five pieces out of each make, just to make sure. Those are our frozen filters, labeled, dry wiping. She will clean her forearms. I won't have to tell her, she will. And if there is a contamination, we clean up, test, clean up, test, clean up, test. So 3 consecutive negatives before we're confident that we're clean. I'm sure Matteo stole this quote from someone, and I don't know who to credit it to. That's why I have the X's here. But the microbiology of raw milk equals the sum of the practices of the entire farm. And from top to bottom, from my crops guys, you know, hey, set the tedder so it doesn't dig up so much dirt. You know, y'all hear about ash content. We want to minimize ash content in hay. It's like, well, why? Does it really matter? Yeah, it really matters. The farm management procedures in the barn with the cows, the milkers, the milk haulers. I don't know how many times I've been yelled at by the milk hauler. and they are a tremendous asset for you. It's like they pick up things that we don't see in the middle of the night. Cheese makers, the affinage process, and even the pack and ship, they realize that we're the last step in this whole process. We got to keep it clean. Tried to get a panoramic view. We're at about 1,500 to 2,000 feet of elevation, and this is the spine of the Green Mountains down there. But this is, you know, what better office do most of us have to work in than a site like this? The trouble is, I live on the other side of that hill. Tough to get there in the early morning. But anyway, thank you for your attention.